once again, welcome all. It's great to see everyone. I know that many schools have finished and students have graduated, so congratulations to all of our graduates and happy summer. It officially becomes summer this week, which I cannot believe. It's almost the end of June. But once again, it's good to see you all. So Leslie, would you like to do the roll call, please?
Okay, 1 second. Okay, Dr. Maureen Bermett.
Here.
Dr. Michael Coyne.
Hi, everyone.
Dr. Margie Gillis.
Good afternoon.
Kimberly Healy. Stephen Hernandez. Dr. Melissa Jenkins.
Present.
Christina Kinsberry. Dr. Stephanie Lockhart. I don't think Fran's with us just yet, so.
Correct.
Correct. Lisa Thomas.
I'm here.
Christina Tights. Roll call is complete.
All right, thank you very much. As we know, we have these norms for equitable, Fran is here. Equitable participation, active listening, and respect for all perspectives. Moving on to minutes. So last time we discussed addressing and embracing Robert's rules. So we'll be doing that moving forward. We are going to have to table the minutes from May 16th. I will be very candid and open. I did go on vacation, one of the first vacations that we've truly had in maybe 15 years. And we were hiking and truly off grid. So we will have to table the minutes. My apologies for that. But we will be sharing those as soon as they are completed, and you can review them, and then we will approve them using Robert's rules at our next meeting, which we will also be discussing today about when those meetings are taking place. So what we also talked about at the last meeting was the center's why, how, and what. And it did bubble up again. I know I brought this up a couple meetings ago, but it did bubble up again, the why, and changing that why. So what I would like to do, and that was on March 21st when I first brought it up, and then I believe it was Fran who brought it up at our last meeting. So I would like to make a motion to change the council goal to match the Connecticut core standards and change it from every Connecticut student has the right to read at or above grade level by the end of 3rd grade to every Connecticut student has the right to read at or above grade level independently and proficiently by the end of 3rd grade.
That's great. Thank you.
So is that, Fran, a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, then we have on the table for you all to vote. If you agree that it should be changed, every Connecticut student has a right to read at or above grade level independently and proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. Please raise your hand and say yes or yay. I didn't see everybody, so is anyone abstaining or saying no?
Maybe
All
people
right.
can put their thumbs, because I can't vote. Like I didn't see who.
Okay, if you can
Or
either do
roll
like
call.
Mike did with the thumbs up icon, or if you could physically. Oh,
Hands
Melissa, do you
up,
have a
like raise
question?
your-
I'm trying to find the thumb.
Okay.
Okay, I
More-
found it. I found it. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay.
Okay, nice. So we're all set then. Beautiful. All right. Thank you all for that. That has been approved and moving forward. As you know, at the last meeting, we had the goals planning process where we talked about what are the council's legislative responsibilities. You examine that strategy that we all created and started to draft the goals. Now, there were emails that were going back and forth around this, and I would like to share that so we can just get some of those noted on the minutes. I am in the office and I had to change my screens around a little bit, so pardon me while I get out this email. Now, Melissa, I know you were one person who did respond. Do you want to say any words while I'm pulling up the email about some of your comments, Dr. Jenkins?
After I pull up the email too.
Okay, we will give us all a second or two to get acclimated. And I do know that Kim responded today and she said that she's going to try to have access to the meeting today. And she did submit some questions and items as well. I just need to find out from her if she wants to put these down as agenda items for upcoming meetings. Oops, someone's in. Oh,
It's
don't know how-
me. I'm
okay.
trying to get in on my computer.
Got it. All right. Melissa, did you find yours? Do you want to share what you were thinking then instead of me talking for you?
I can. I had shared, making sure we provide feedback on the waiver process, since that process is important to many of the state constituents, to understand, their core program, either recommendations. And I had also shared, providing additional clarity about the role of core programs, because they're not perfect. They provide the foundational components needed to read and comprehend. So making sure people understand the why behind core programs. Core programs help clarify scope and sequence of learning, some of the basic skills outlined in the National Reading Panel recommendations. But I had buttressed those thoughts around providing clarity around the waiver process. In regards to the bullet about the Connecticut K-3 strategy, I had mentioned that the document could be a springboard for the development of goals, because I believe the document speaks of leadership, assessment, instruction, professional development, and the multi-generational family engagement. Then there was a bullet about evaluate and identify supports for schools. And I mentioned having the committee having a good understanding about which assessments are school districts using, and how would we use the data from those assessments to communicate that we're making progress with equitable outcomes for all children. So if we're looking at data to see how many children are reading on or above grade level independently and proficiently, is that data showing that we're closing gaps with children who are multilingual learners or children receiving special education supports? What would be our metric for training teachers around the science of reading? And I had mentioned about, using the literacy scan survey as a tool That was something we used previously. I think it's still a viable tool. And then finally, I mentioned, maybe we could benefit from a tracker or monitoring agenda similar to what Alliance districts do and to track progress. And I think Kim Healy mentioned this morning having an understanding similar to what I mentioned around and creating transparency around the monies provided by the Connecticut legislature. Because if we want to ever ask for more funding, let's create transparency and communication around the funding that's been provided. I think that's it, Melissa.
Does anyone have any questions or clarifications for Dr. Jenkins? And then I'm gonna turn it over to Fran because Fran did respond in an email to Melissa. All right, Fran, did you want to share your response then to Melissa?
Yeah, I think Melissa's correct in much of what she says. And, I know that I have not been a fan of mandated programs, and I still am not a fan of mandated programs. However, what I do believe is that we must have appropriate assessments, yes, but we need a literacy curriculum. And in doing my work around the state now with science of reading training, what I'm finding is total inequity there. I'm finding that the high socioeconomic districts have curriculum. They have, standards and strategies and objectives and goals and all of those pieces. And the districts that are not high socioeconomic do not have it. They go directly to programs for their curriculum. And frankly, that's an issue. And I'm seeing it across the state. And I'm of the old school. And maybe things have changed, and if they have, you need to tell me, but I'm of the old school where you take your state standards, you bring together people to create curriculum with what kids need to know and be able to do by each grade level, and then you choose your resources, which may be one of the mandated programs. I really, the programs are the less important to me. The most important is that we are very clear with our teachers on what level. And I'm worried that that is not the case. And so when we do assessments, what are we assessing? Are we assessing what is in the curriculum? Where are we going with those assessments? What's our foundation? And for me, it's curriculum. But please, as members of the commission, you're a lot smarter. You have a lot more reading background than I do. But I feel this way in every subject area. If teachers don't have a roadmap, so to speak, of what they are to teach at every grade level, where are we going? What if a kid starts that program and only finishes half? What happens then? So I just need to know that. My thing is, I just want to be forthright about it. It's not that I hate programs. Of course I brought programs, but I worry if we don't have a curriculum, if we don't have well-trained teachers and school leaders, all of those pieces are things that I want for goals on this reading commission. Yes, I want the kids to read independently by the end of grade 3, but I feel strongly that those are the things that are necessary to get there. But I want you to argue with me because I'm not hearing it all the time here, and maybe I'm wrong. So you know, I want to be told that, and I'll embrace what the experts know. So that's my piece, and that was my piece with Melissa. Okay.
Thanks. And something nifty that I'm noticing now about Teams is apparently there are numbers in order as to who raises their hand, which is so wonderful. So that is so helpful as someone facilitating. Dr. Coyne, your hand went up first.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that and thank you, Fran, for your comments and your advocacy all along for really understanding what we want kids to be able to do and know at each grade level. Although I'm not quite sure when you're talking about curriculum exactly what you mean, because I'm just thinking about a specific example. So say foundational reading skills K through 3, which has been something that we've been talking quite a bit about. You know, those are expectations at each grade level are clearly spelled out in the foundational skills sections of the Common Core state standards. And I'm not sure why a district would choose any different outcomes than, or would have different expectations for different levels of foundational reading skill mastery than something that was put together by, you know, experts from across the field or at the state level. So I'm not sure why creating expectations or benchmark goals for something like foundational reading skills would be done district by district.
You know what, Michael? I couldn't agree more with you. I do believe that those foundational goals that the standards provide are the foundational goals upon which the curriculum should be built. What I do believe is that that curriculum should then take those goals, should break them down into objectives for the teachers and strategies. How do you do this? How is it done? And then, you know, provide the resources, provide a sequence of what you expect to see in the first quarter of the year and the second quarter of the year.
Yeah, but that's exactly what a core program does.
It may do it, but it may not provide everything in that core program that a child needs to know.
How would you know, teachers that have so much else to do would know exactly what students should be doing in that space between what the experts have done when they put together a core program? And I mean, all of these have crosswalks between Common Core state standards. To me, it feels like it's an intermediate step that's asking teachers and schools to do work that's already been done for them by experts and takes time away from their ability to be good teachers, which is implement really effective tools that have already been designed to align with Common Core state standards. So I'm not sure where the value added is in all this work that teachers and schools and districts are doing to develop a curriculum that really isn't, to me, different than how a core program is aligned to state or national standards.
I haven't developed curriculum in a long time, but I will tell you that I spent years developing literacy curriculum when we had basals, when we had all kinds of, when I wasn't allowed to use a phonics book, you know, I had to hide it under my desk.
Yeah.
But I worked very hard with teachers to develop that curriculum based upon at that time, the Connecticut state frameworks. It had so much more in it than the frameworks. It had more in it than any core curriculum. It had strategies. It had different resources that could be used to meet the goals and objectives. And I just found, you know, when I started teaching, Michael, I only had a basal. I planned less for reading than I planned for anything else. And I think I told you that because I just followed the basal step by step. I'm not sure that was the best way to teach my children that were in front of me. You know, children needed different things, and yet I was following one program for each child. And I
think that's different though. The core programs these days, they have all differentiation built in. They have different strands for different learners. They have strategies built in. You know, what I find for most schools and districts that are developing the curriculum these days is they set out broad standards, and then teachers have to go on teach teachers to find lesson plans and resource and materials. I mean, I think that's the process that goes into the adoption of a strong core program, which is an understanding of what the frameworks and the benchmarks and the standards are, and then finding a core program and supplemental materials that are going to provide, you know, the kind of strategies and the materials and the resources and the supports for teachers. And I think developing a curriculum is sort of a step these days that I feel like takes schools and off track from the more work which should be finding those kind of resources and core programs that are going to do that already for them. I think that's what's different between core programs now and basal programs in the past.
Well, and then Margie, I'm sorry, I saw Margie's hands up too. I know that others want to talk. Margie, did you want to say something? And then I know Maureen and Melissa.
Actually, to build on that, because I think this is a very important conversation we're having. Part of it is semantics. What is the definition of a curriculum? What is the definition of a program? Like, a lot of people use the two interchangeably. So I think we have to define what we mean by that, what we mean by each. So a curriculum is, and as you said, Fran, a lot of districts spend their summers, a lot of their summer creating curriculum that hopefully will drive the instruction. But what happens, and I think Michael, you said this, is it doesn't necessarily drive instruction enough so that the teachers know exactly what is expected to teach, right? It may provide some information, pacing guides, units of, whatever, but in the end, teachers end up going to teachers pay teachers because they don't necessarily have all the goods they need. So I see them as being complementary, ideally. So a curriculum could develop, a district could spend some time saying, okay, this is our pacing guide that we're going to use that maps onto the use of the core reading program and provides the teachers with explicit information about what parts of the core reading program they're going to use during this time of ELA instruction. And here's when I'm going to use this core reading part of the core program for my science or for my social studies. That is time well spent for my way of thinking, but not creating something from scratch that, takes a lot of time and energy. And so for me, I see these as complementing one another. I also want to say, like Melissa, you're here representing Bridgeport, and I know Bridgeport has used a core reading program now with some success in the last few years. So I don't know that every district, every high needs district is without curriculum guidance and direction and a core reading program. And so I think it would be helpful, Melissa, if you spoke to what Bridgeport has done along those lines. I'd love to hear that. Maybe you had something else you wanted to say, Melissa, but I think it would be helpful to hear from you on that front too.
I guess with the use of wonders, at least for foundational reading skills and comprehension, it's kind of the foundation and base for literacy instruction. In an effort to support children with some creativity and, say, executive functioning skills, we've used wonders as a foundation, say, for building some projects. And sometimes we have to supplement to make that happen. So I think that's what Fran is talking about more with the curriculum and making sure children have some authentic learning experiences. So like we have these maker spaces now. So we want children, of course, to break code and comprehend, but we also want them to be collaborators and communicators and build projects and present projects. So I think that's where some of the teachers have a little more autonomy in how they communicate that learning around, say, animals and habitats, or using a bottle buddy for a presentation on Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King. So we're working on the basics and the foundation so children can break code and comprehend at higher levels and be critical thinkers. But we also want them to be collaborators and communicators and know how to work together. And also thinking about there are multiple ways to measure learning. So there's that performance-based and there's a project-based. And this is still evolving in Bridgeport, but we use the core program as the base, like not the end, almost as a launch to give children other opportunities too. So that curriculum part is still developing. I hope that makes sense to people.
If I can just answer that, Melissa, having been in Bridgeport, to teach student work in curriculum so that it just seemed deeper and fuller than here are the objectives. And then I'll be quiet because I want to hear from all of you, but that is my piece. You know, where's the professionalism and the ownership from the teachers? That, you know, was something that I treasured as a superintendent or, you know, assistant superintendent when I did curriculum, because I learned so much from them and their professionalism. How do you capture that in a core program? And how do you capture their ownership of what they are, what is going forward in the district?
Well,
you know,
friend, having been in Bridgeport, you have to know that to capture that, there are a lot of like roundtable conversations. You know, we have the BEA, which, you know, embarked on collective bargaining. That's they flag, they fly. So through a lot of conversations and feedback with teachers. So for example, we've made modifications about when children start with foundational reading skills. If they're newcomers, we're going to front load a lot more language comprehension versus starting immediately with decoding to make sure students understand, you know, the relationships with a teacher. So it's not just, it wasn't at least here a bottom down, it was almost top up, bottom down, getting feedback from teachers about what's working, what's not working, and making adjustments based on that feedback. Because they're not going to let any of that happen here, as you know.
I do know that. And I do know that it's great to capture it so that it is known across all first grades. You know, this is a good strategy. That's all I'm saying. That's how I captured it. And I don't want to dominate, which I usually say I don't want to do, and then I do it. So I'm going to be quiet because we have so many reading people on this call. I want to hear, you know, just my preference to hear from you.
I have just one quick follow-up, which is that I really appreciate, Melissa, what you were saying. And in some ways, it almost sounds like, I mean, to me, it feels like an informed school district team can select a core program, you know, based on, you know, knowledge of Common Core state standards, some sort of Connecticut frameworks or standards, and then do that work, Fran, that you're talking about, which is, you know, that this is the resource, and then not just implement it blindly, but implement it in an informed way where schools have buy-in. Like Margie was saying, they make decisions about, we're prioritizing this component and we need to supplement this component. But I worry that when schools and districts start with developing their curriculum, they're basically trying to replicate and build a lot of what's already built into really strong materials. And I feel like having a strong core program is a really strong foundation for teachers and schools to build that kind of buy-in and professional learning and professionalism, and supports that process. It doesn't have to happen after that process.
And then I know Maureen had her hand up, but then her screen went black. I don't know, is she back?
I'm still on. I don't know. My camera seems to not be working, which is interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
perfectly. It was just, we can't see your hand up anymore. We can't see you. So I'm sorry if you've been excluded from the conversation.
I've heard the whole conversation. I'll just maybe after I speak, I'll log back in and see if that does the trick.
Okay.
I looked at the definition of curriculum in the chat plus the dialogue, and it really is really about the art and science of teaching reading. Even as I hear Melissa from Bridgeport, she's already describing the art and science of reading because they have bought one of the core programs, but they've already had to make adjustments for newcomers, for kids with different reading issues, for an assessment by, I would assume, a skilled group of folks who say, wait a minute, this student needs something different. And that part is, this dialogue is impressing upon me that this is just going to be a very hard initiative to measure, because if we're going to be measuring what these core programs do, it's clear that not everyone's going to use them in the same way. And that was occurring to me as I was prepping for today's meeting. I'm like, how is this whole thing going to be assessed? Because if people are using bits and pieces, that's really not the same thing as a core program. Because I think all of us, I don't know how everyone else's waiver looks, but mine has, it really brought in everything we try to do for any possible reading scenario with one of the current core program that we use. So I think that this is just a very complex, reading is probably the most complex thing you can teach. And I really feel like the art and science of it needs to make sure that that gets into this work, and how is this all going to be assessed. And I do agree, you still have to have a curriculum that guides teachers, and they have to have their hand in it, because then there's ownership, and that they also have the experience in classrooms, current experience in classrooms, that many of us have been out of the classroom for quite some time. So it's such a complex issue, and there's not an easy answer to how to do it right or well. And I also agree with Fran's point. I've talked to many colleagues. It was clear to me that our high challenge districts often did not have a curriculum or had a hodgepodge of programs, and that for them to go from that to high levels of reading achievement may be a very interesting process. Because if they're only relying on the program, that's not going to get them there. Now I'll try to get my camera to work.
All right, thank you. Lisa.
Thank you. Listening to those of you who are speaking about getting buy-in and ownership from the people who are actually doing the boots on the ground work in their classrooms, takes me back to the K-3 literacy strategy that we are, supposed to be using as our guide. And multiple times that strategy talks about literacy teams, about interventionists. A lot of schools are using a PLC model, and I think that's where the buy-in has to start. That those models and that work depends on a district having funding to have enough interventionists to provide time for those PLC grade level meetings, and to be able to have some consistency at their grade levels. So this isn't a problem we can solve, obviously, but we can perhaps at some point figure out ways to be advocates for districts to be able to access those financial and human resources. And I can only tell you from, an experience that I've just had covering a third grade classroom for the last 3 weeks of a school year in a district that after 3 tries still has no budget. And so the outcome of that has been the loss of 23 teaching positions in the district, which means they're reshuffling teachers at grade levels, they're increasing class sizes. And my assumption is that the literacy interventionists won't be lost from those budgets or from those districts because of the critical role they play. The question is the loss of consistency and perhaps the loss of being able to.
You're frozen.
Oh no. Let's see. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So the question is, how, and I think that goes back to the funding issue that several people have brought up, showing transparency and the need for districts to have this funding, especially in doing an analysis of districts that have lost a lot of the foundation they had tried to build to achieve these goals. That's it for me, unless I'm frozen again.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything else anyone wants to say? Fran, I see your hand is up. Or I don't know if that's a holdover. All right. I appreciate obviously what everyone has shared and discussed. In one of our first meetings, as I put in the chat, we did define what we felt curricula or curriculum is and are. So, we can always return back to that definition and refine it or add to it, add it to our document. We do have curriculum documents too that the academic office has put out around curricula and how to create it and what questions to be thinking about across the contents, not just really zeroed in on literacy. You'll all be happy to know that Irene Parisi, our Chief Academic Officer, and Dr. Joanne White are moving along with the K-3 curricula that was mandated and getting that ready. Oops, it looks like Fran was out and I'm admitting her again. As well as the curriculum models and the programs that were approved so far by the state and have been posted are very much what you're talking about. It's very much that sequence. It offers, like Dr. Coyne said, they offer so many more materials now than they did in the past so that you can address different levels of learners. There are models of student work. There's professional development built in where teachers can watch videos and receive various supports. But as we've all said many, many times, that you just can't add one thing, right? It's like that onion that unpeels. There's many layers to it. And it's like the triad we've talked about in the past too, where we're really focusing on the teacher, the student, and the content. And when you make a change in one area, like the content, you're going to need supports in the other. So professional learning is key. The professional learning that they're getting in the schools, that we at the state are providing, that the RESCs are providing, all of these are so important. And pardon if I've left anyone out, of course, our partners as well, our literacy partners. But all this is so important to really lift and elevate. We've talked about the masterclass many times and helping administrators. And it's not only understanding what literacy is, it's also understanding what structures need to be put in place so that systemic change can not only happen, but it can sustain as it's right, sustain and really stick. So thank you all so much for sharing. What I would like to propose is having some sort of a small working group, much like we did around the strategy, the K-3 strategy, having a small group work the next couple months over the summer on the goals and kind of solidifying those draft goals to then present to the main group. Everyone, I don't know what your feelings about this are, or if who would be interested in doing this work. Obviously I would be interested in being a part of it, just like I was with the strategy. But I think that that might be helpful for us to really solidify our goals, is having this small group work on it after listening to what everyone said, looking at the documents that were, that we've referenced, and coming up with a more solid draft to present to the whole group. So what are thoughts around that before we vote on that?
I'd be happy to work on that. if there's room for what we have talked about, if there's room for, I like Michael's ideas. I like Melissa's ideas. I like Maureen's, all of ours. Is there room for that? Is there room for us to talk about perhaps curriculum, programs, interventionists, and well-trained teachers? Is that part of what the commission can advocate for? Because that's what I believe reading is all about. It's complex. There's no question about it. And I would love to have a strong voice for the commission for what is needed for K-3 literacy. We need to be clear on what kids need to do and need to know and be able to do. How we arrive at that, I'm open, guys, but I think that's important, and the training is incredibly important, as well as the interventionists and reading teachers. So, if all of those things could be considered, I'd be more than happy to work on goals.
Thank you, Melissa. And then I saw, Maureen, I saw your comment also. Thank you. And yes, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. My intent was to do just like we did with the strategy, where a small group of people ended up working on the strategy and then presenting it to the whole group for review, feedback, editing, etc. So, Dr. Jenkins.
Hi, I was looking at the strategy document, and it's divided into sections that has different actions. So I guess I was wondering, would the committee be interested in taking, a section like, I think I'm looking now, it states specific actions that support Connecticut's K-3 literacy strategy, actions to support sustainable literacy leadership in district and school-wide literacy systems. So I guess, kind of trying to stick to the document as a guide and encompass, because I know there are two external pieces outside of the document, the waiver and the finances. So you can't, so everything else I mentioned is coming from the document. So there's the waiver and there's the finances. And I think that in order to be mobilized and get some momentum, the waiver and the finances have to be addressed, but there are some key components in the document that need to be lifted for the document to be a living strategy.
Right. Yes. And, and I just want to bring up too, as Fran was talking, Melissa, as you're talking, this legislation of which the council and the members and the programs and the waivers is so much more than just those pieces. When you look, and I know Fran and I have had this conversation too, when you look at it, it talks about that professional learning. And I believe, Fran, you've brought that up at other meetings. This is about professional learning. This is about what supports we can be given to districts to be really understanding what is reading, what is literacy, how do we teach that in K-3 according to the science. So I think that, and I know we've talked about this before, but I think that because there were dates assigned to the picking out of the programs, the curriculum models and programs, there were dates assigned to the waiver. I think that became our focus as a council, and this really is our time to expand into other areas of this legislation and to expand into other areas of literacy and to really make this broader, as I believe you are all suggesting. Now, it would be up to this group. I mean, this is what the last time when I did this all call, Dr. Coyne and Dr. Jenkins stepped forward and said, you know, we would really like to work on the strategy. So the three of us had some like teams like meetings. We did some things in email, online, but we decided how often to meet, etc. I was just thinking if we did something, and it just seemed to go very smoothly because then we could share with you all. And like I said, you said, oh, yes, let's continue with this. Oh, let's edit this. And we really went through that document together. So that's why I was thinking, you know, it could be up to this group using what we've already sketched out. I mean, we know that we do have these draft goals that we discussed the last time, and maybe having some sub goals to the goals or deciding where this should go next. Kim?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, just going back to like the original, you know, part of the legislation was also including, you know, parents in this whole conversation. And something that I'm hearing down my way anyway is, you know, parents are concerned, right? I mean, they hear districts potentially are going to have to be spending all this extra funding. They also are concerned that they didn't even understand that there was, I'm going to call them problems with the reading programs, reading curriculum that some of our districts have been using for a very long time. And now we're making these big changes. And, you know, in our experience, I mean, my son is still in school, and when you change programs, there's a lot of, you know, learning that the teachers need to do, and just bringing everyone up to speed without losing, you know, a lot of time in the classroom becomes a concern as well. So, you know, one of the things I think I mentioned in my email was, you know, maybe enabling people on the council, at least in my, I'm very happy to do it, you know, to go to wherever is needed to kind of explain to parents that, you know, changes are happening for the better, and, you know, that all of our school districts are going to be working really hard to make sure that our kids, you know, are not going to lose any time or, you know, lose any momentum with their reading learning. So just some thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I don't think you were on the call when I did reference your email, and I didn't read it out loud. I was waiting for you to come because I knew you were going to be coming on. So thank you. I appreciate you referencing that. And I do appreciate your offer. I don't think that that's really, I know that we advocate and that we go out into communities and we have conversations as members because we are members. But I have been working with some of our literacy partners on parent engagement. I'd actually, Dr. Gillis, would you like to talk about the pilot in which you've been engaging and the work we've done previously, hoping to expand at some point?
So which pilot?
For the parent engagement?
Oh, sorry. Yes. So when we started this work as CK3LI, one of our 5 goals was to engage families. And we actually, at that point in time, Elaine Zimmerman was at the commission, and she, of course, is very, very has that we could deliver to families vis-a-vis initially the first 5 pilot schools. And then we expanded over a period of, you know, the years that we worked on this project together. We mostly worked with PLTI facilitators. So the Parent Leadership Training Initiative, as you all probably know, has worked in the state for many years. They train parents as facilitators within their communities. And so we engage with those facilitators to roll out the family engagement curriculum that we created, a series of 3 events spread out over the course of the year. 3 years ago, during COVID, we realized that we had to change what we were doing and how we were delivering it so that we could have the option of doing virtual training, which we did for 2 years during COVID. And then last year we came back together face to face, which was wonderful, but it was the collective decision of the Connecticut Literacy Model team that we should revamp what we were doing. And put a focus on the districts taking the lead on these family engagement trainings. And so we've worked with 5 schools for the past 2 years, 1 in Hartford, 1 in Norwalk, 1 in East Haven, 1 in Derby, and 1 in Stamford. And we've been kind of working to study what's the next iteration of the family engagement work going to look like. And we will be scaling it up next year based on the experiences that we've had for the last 2 years. We've worked closely with Joanne White and Judy Carson from the State Department of Ed. They've been terrific partners in kind of using the resources that already exist at SDE and figuring out how we can leverage what's or offer the program, I use the term with a lowercase p, to as many schools in the state as possible with the funding that we have to utilize. So questions about that?
I'm not sure. Yeah, only because that's not,
not what
so
you
that's
were-
5 out of 100 and yeah, like
No, I
I just
understand.
need, I mean, you know, this is coming quickly, right, to our district near you. And parents have no idea, or they're hearing it in a very kind of negative way, whereas, oh my God, the state's mandating that we spend all this money on a program. Why? Like, what's wrong with what we have? Why do we have to change? What does this all mean? I mean, I must tell you, like I put in my email, I just refer to them to the Emily Hanford podcast. But that might upset them even more. I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone that has children learning to read. I will say I have a lot of older people that I talk to, like myself, where my kids already are long past that, but or something hasn't kind of sent out an advisory. I don't know how you guys communicate with superintendents, and then, you know, do you require them to inform parents? But it seems like are going through a lot more information than I was thinking. I was basically just doing top line and not actually explaining all about, you know, that much detail about the changes, but just the importance of the change, I guess, is how I was looking at it.
Now, Dr. Coyne, I know you had your hand up, but if you don't mind, I am going to ask, Dr. Brummett has to leave in 3 minutes, but would you like to speak from the superintendent's point of view on that the curriculum in your district and getting information out on legislation, et cetera?
Sure, I can speak from how I've communicated. You know, at the time when this was all coming down, I was the president of HASA, so I kept HASA informed. That's all Hartford area superintendents. When it comes to parents, I've been a little more cautious because we did put forth a waiver. So obviously, I've informed the board of all these legislative changes, but I've been very cautious about families because I'm not sure what I would communicate yet. Obviously, if it's required that we change programs, then I would have a communication strategy around that, but I kind of don't want to put the cart before the horse. It also, I forget which panelist said this, but it's going to be a very careful communication tool, because if for some reason our program is not approved, are parents going to be under the impression their children have had, you know, substandard reading instruction for the last 10 years that the kids have been in the district? So that's a little concerning, but so that's how I've personally handled it. I know my colleagues have all kept their boards informed. I can't speak to whether folks, how they communicated with families. I believe those that adopted some new programs did communicate that, but those waiting on waivers, I am not sure about.
Thank you, Dr. Brummett. I really appreciate that. And we'll keep you posted on the next half an hour. Dr. Coyne, did you want to say something? And thank you for allowing that. I appreciate that.
Oh, sure. I was just going to also volunteer to help with goals for the implementation council. But I also wanted to just bring up to a caution, which is that, you know, the goal of our council is to, you know, support the implementation of work that the center is doing. So I just want to make sure that we don't come up with goals for ourselves that really should be goals for the center to do. That we don't want to outline the types of things that we want the center to be focusing on, which, I just don't want us to kind of recreate, like take over the role of the work that the center is doing in the implementation council, which is support the center in doing some of these things.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I do appreciate that, because much of what we have been discussing, as Kim herself said, is in that legislation of providing the professional learning, of providing supports to parents and to higher education, etc. And yes, I very much appreciate what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And I agree with what you're saying, basically, right? Kim, you have your hand up? No, okay. And then Fran, then did you want to say something? And Melissa, thank you. I did see your note in the chat about
goals, but I also want to say thank you, Michael, because you're absolutely right. And I really wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking commission, but I like thinking reading center instead. So thank you for that.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. All right. Any other conversation around, I'm gonna have to unshare here, sorry.
I also want to say, Melissa, if I could just.
Yes, absolutely.
Setting. I mean, it may be done.
Thank you.
It's easy parking, a nice conference room, and we do serve good food.
However much money I'm allowed to do. So thank you. But I have seen the food, and she is so right.
We'll price it out for you, Melissa.
Thanks, Fran. All right, wonderful. So the names that I've captured for people who are interested in working in a smaller group to look at the draft goals, to see if we can draft some firmer goals to then share back with the group would be Fran, Maureen, Mike, Melissa. Am I missing anybody? And not everyone, don't feel pressure to do this, because then we won't have a full group to show these to. If everybody does it, but you're all welcome. I mean, not to leave you out. All right. So Fran, Maureen, Mike, Melissa, perfect. Thank you so much for that. Now, we did not use Robert's rules, but I could make it formal and say that I am proposing that we do a smaller group who will work on the draft goal made by the September 19th meeting. Anybody want to second or change what I just said? Margie?
I'll second it.
Okay. Lisa?
I don't have my hands up. That seems like something you could do by consensus.
Well, I wasn't sure which way everyone wanted to go, so I would rather go more formal, but if you want to go consensus with this, we're fine too. We just have to find that space. All right, so I put it out there. Margie seconded. Ayes, raise your hand or put your thumbs up. Any nays or noes? Anyone abstain? All right, great. Thank you all for creating a smaller group, and we can find some dates to meet. And Fran, thank you so much for the offer of your space. It is a great space and it's much appreciated.
It is.
All right. All right, so moving right along. Could you show me, please, if you can see my screen? Just a thumbs up. I put my sharing screen back up. No. All right, let me try again then, please. Thank you. All right, can you see dates and times? Thumbs up?
Yep.
Yes, oh, lovely. All right, so these were some of the dates that I showed the last meeting. There was someone in the chat who thought November may be too close to Thanksgiving, so I moved it up a week or back a week to November 14th. So I'd like to talk about finalizing these dates and times: September 19th, November 14th, January 16th, March 19th, and May 21st from 1 to 2:30 as we've been doing so. Any conversation around this? And welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm so sorry I'm late.
Well, we appreciate that you're here. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to make a motion that these are our final dates and times for the 2023-24 year. You'll see that I have not yet designated in-person or virtual, but these are the final dates and times. Would anyone like to second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. That was Fran. Okay. If you are in agreement, please. Are you fine with these dates? Okay, thank you so much. So then there would be no one abstaining or Stephanie, I can read the dates to you. It sounded like you're in the car. Would you like me to do that?
Yes, I can actually see them. The dates are fine with me.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so that's everyone then.
Melissa,
Okay.
will you send out invites sooner than
Yes.
later so we can hold those on our calendars?
Absolutely. Leslie has been amazing and very supportive, and I'm sure she will do that immediately. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
I'm going to propose that our September 19th one is virtual, and then at that meeting, we can decide for the next in-person or virtual. So if
Okay.
you, Lisa, would you rather meet in person for the first one? What do you all think? That's my thoughts, is the first is virtual and then we can decide, but because we don't have much time left, but what do you guys think?
That seems fine.
Oh, okay, great. All right, then the first one will be virtual, and then at the next meeting, we shall decide which of those are virtual or in person and where we want them to be. All right, awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, too. In the chat, she did put virtual for the first one. All right, moving right along. Here is my update. So extensions and applications requesting a waiver. So all extensions, districts wrote letters requesting extensions, and they were approved by myself and the commissioner as per legislation. The applications requesting a waiver. So the newest legislation passed, and that gives districts 2 more years to implement. The waiver process is moving along, as you know from our previous meetings, that I've contracted with PCG. They have a lot of experience, expertise, and they will be now meeting with districts twice. The commissioner felt it was really important that there was a lot of back and forth conversation. So because we are meeting with, because we're meeting twice, that will now extend the process just a bit. So we're hoping that by the end of August, that districts will receive information back on the waivers, on their waiver requests. We did have to just write, I had to do a superintendent memo to the districts who did submit waivers, because we noticed that many of the programs that they were putting forward as part of their waiver did not list publisher and or copyright date. And that is information that is necessary. So we did ask them to submit this information, as it was missing from their waiver, their first waiver application. So that went out, and districts have responded accordingly, which has been much appreciated and does help to clarify some questions that we had. The legislative update, like I said, is that the new legislation did move
Can I
forward.
just interrupt
Kim,
a second?
I'm sorry, yes.
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, I just threw my hand up just because so how many waivers have they reviewed? And have there been any that have been granted or declined?
No, so for content, to ensure that they have all the documents, but they have not been reviewed to be accepted or not. So they have looked at all of the waivers. We cannot move forward until we have this essential information. So if they listed a program, they did not list what year that program was created or written, and it is very different year to year. So let's say they're using a 2005 edition, but then there's also a 2009 and a 2020 edition. And if it's not in there, we don't know what to look at. So we had to ask for this missing information. It was across the board, and people have been supplying that.
So all 80 something applications didn't have all,
I don't want to say all because that's not fair, but the majority did not. So I did have to do an all call to all of them saying, we need this information.
And how many of those waiver applications actually had one of the 7 approved programs? I mean, do we have waivers that just qualify automatically? Because they have, I know there are some districts in Connecticut that are using one of the programs. So shouldn't they just automatically be granted a waiver?
Well, they don't have to apply for a waiver. The waivers are only for those, and this is per legislation, the waiver application process is only for those districts who are not using one of the approved curriculum program models or programs. So it's for them to present their programs for review. And when you look at the waiver and the application, it does include what had to be there for legislations. For example, I can read right from it that they had to submit information that it's evidence-based, scientifically based, and focused on competency in the following areas of reading: oral language, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, rapid automatic name or letter name fluency, and reading comprehension. They had to submit data collected from reading assessments, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, eligibility for free or reduced price lunches, students whose primary language is not English, and students with disabilities. And they also had to submit a strategy to address the remaining reading achievement gaps. So that was just for those districts who did not want to apply for an extension, who did not want to purchase one of the approved programs, and who wanted to put their curriculum or their programs forward for review.
So have you heard from every single, I get how many districts use one of the 7 approved programs?
That's information I have not yet collected. What I collected were those who wanted an extension and requested an extension, and those who were requesting a waiver.
And how many did that total up to?
You know what, I'll have to get back to you on that. I think that we had 86 waivers. That was something I answered so much previously. And extensions, I would have to double check on that.
I guess
so I can get back to you.
Right. So like how, right. So the question would be, then you would assume if they didn't ask for an extension or a waiver, they must have one of the 7 approved programs. Either that or they're just not complying with the other 2.
Or they're in the process of. They had to, according to the old legislation, the previous legislation, they had to implement it by July 1 of 2023. That's been extended for 2 years under the new legislation. So I prefer to go to the positive to say that they have been reviewing and looking and will be choosing one of the approved.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, because I mean, the repercussions from not following the law, they're pretty serious. I mean, it is a law. It's like stopping at a stop sign. You can make the choice not to stop, but something will result if you don't stop. So one of the things that would occur, and hopefully we won't get to that point, is that the grants that districts are granted and the federal grants, they would not be able to participate in that because one of the stipulations by the federal government and by our state government is that you are following all the laws, and the superintendents must sign off saying that they're following all the laws. So I don't think that there'd be a
Yeah, but if they're not
superintendent
applying for a waiver or an extension, you would think maybe they're not too interested in the funds anyway, right? The funds are only applicable to bringing in this curriculum, correct?
So the funds, so that's actually one of the next bullets. The funding that's available, we have ARPA funds that I've been talking about all along, which is the 24 million. 20 million of that has gone to districts. And that is a grant that they are just granted. And yes, they have to utilize those funds to support the legislation. So they can purchase the assessments that have been approved by our state board. They can purchase the programs or the curricula that were approved by the state, or they can use the monies to support professional learning around the approved assessments, approved programs, approved curricula. The next is new that the commissioner is really wanting to support small towns. So we're working on the formula and finalizing the formula for this, but it would be about 4.5 million of ARP ESSER funds to do the same thing for the small towns, because we know that small towns don't often get the monies that obviously our larger districts get based on, you know, how many students are there. So we're really trying to support those small towns as well. So we're working on that grant. And then the money that we're not churning right out into districts with this Right to Read grant is about 2.7 million, and that's going into professional learning. So that's some of the partners you can see on the bottom here. PAPS, we're using the ARP ESSER funds to support the masterclass. The Hill for Literacy and Literacy How are our partners with the University of Connecticut. That has been state funds, but we're also going to be using some of the ARPA funding to support more professional learning for more districts other than just our alliance districts. ReadCon is a professional learning that has been ongoing. That's not using our ARPA funds. And then WestEd, that is going to continue using some of our ARPA funding to support small towns in literacy and creating structures around that. So that's basically where the money's going, is into districts and then professional learning to support the changes. Another Hill for Literacy contract is for districts to get support on how to pick one of the curriculum models or programs that were approved to support districts in those choices, much like they've been doing in Massachusetts. So
can I just go sorry
Sure.
to go back, but the 20 million ARPA Right to Read
Yes.
grant, you said
Yes.
that was previously distributed. Is that the money they received during the like 2 years ago, or?
Nope, that's a whole separate grant. There's 186, I want to say. I released those grants a couple of weeks ago. Districts have already been in there and filling out the questions. It's an online grant system, and they were allocated funds according to a formula based on the ARPA rules. So that's.
So how do we know how much each municipality received?
You can either ask the town or you could email me, and it would be an FOI, and I could share that information with you.
Okay. All right, so that's the 24 million, that was
20 million. 20 million of that went into the Right to Read grants. And I know you froze. I don't know if you can still hear me, but 20 million of that went to the Right to Read. It's split between 2 years, but any funds not spent this year will roll into next year. And it actually is a grant where they could be paid back. So in the last year or so, if they've purchased any of these materials, they can submit the receipts to be funded for those materials.
And so the other 4 million of the 24 million went to the partners? Is that?
It's
Is that where
not
the other 4
quite
million went?
four, it's, so to the districts went, let me make sure, 20,145,000. So there's about 2.7 million that were left over, and not all of it. No contracts, no money, none of this ARPA money has been spent yet. The
Oh, so
districts
what
are
have you been-
still
how have
filling
you been
out their
paying the partners?
forms in the
Oh.
system. Pardon, I'm sorry, what?
How have we been paying the partners? Is that from the original funding that we received?
Other sources. So I have a line for the state budget. And then someone like a WestEd has just given their expertise, and we've been granted their services, which have been so nice. So no, we haven't had to pay for that. ReadCon continues to come out of the state line, as does the Hill for Literacy How UConn work. CAPS, the masterclass, has come out of the ARP ESSER funding. We have coming up a survey of all teachers that's mandated also. That comes out of the state line. So none of the ARPA funds have been spent yet because the contracts have not yet finalized, gone through the system, and the districts are still filling out or completing their ARPA grant requests. Margie, do you have a question?
I do actually.
Sure.
The question has to do with, just the waiver, and we have a lot of districts, approximately half of the districts in the state have submitted waiver requests, and that's concerning to me in many respects. But I guess the question that I have is specific to the language in the bill, which basically says that a request for waiver has to include data that's disaggregated data to show that the districts have met the requirement that every subgroup has met the goals, benchmark goals. Am I correct in saying that?
So what the legislation says, I know I just read it, but I can read it again. Data collected from reading assessments that has been disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, eligibility for free or reduced price lunches, students whose primary language is not English, and students with disabilities, and then a strategy to address those remaining reading achievement gaps. So those are the two other pieces besides the information on what they're utilizing.
Okay, and I just hope, I'm just putting in a plug for the fact that we still have a gap that is obstinate. And I really hope that whoever's reading these waivers is taking that piece seriously. And so I'm just stating that publicly.
So when we finalize the, there's a rubric that we're going to be using, pulling together what was in the waiver application. So it's no new information, but it's just set up in a nice rubric for reviewers. You can see exactly what they're going to be looking at.
Great.
We're finalizing that. But once again, that's what the legislation says that they need to be.
Will we be able to see that rubric? The council?
I'm going to post it online. I'll post it online. As soon as
Perfect.
it's final, it's going to be posted online along with information on the reviewers, etc.
Excellent. Thank you,
Yep.
Melissa.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm looking at the information that I believe it was Kim asked. There were 25 districts who submitted formal letters for extensions. Some of them also applied for the waiver, so I had to respond to them saying that, you know, if their waiver was not approved, then they could ask for the extension. But now that all districts have 2 years, it makes it a little different because everyone has a 2-year extension, which is so exciting. They can be implementing and putting things, they could be putting things into practice, professional learning. We heard a lot of feedback where some districts wanted to roll it out grade by grade. So I think this really helps all of us in understanding that it takes time to make change and really advocating for districts that they needed just a little bit more time to put in the changes that are required. And like I said, it really resonates, I'm sure, with all of us who are saying that's not just the program, it's also the professional development and the communication piece. So by having a few more years to do that, it really has allowed everyone to breathe a little more. All right, so those were my updates. I did not put this down, but we do have candidates that we are moving forward and who will soon be contacted by HR so that hopefully I can have staff. As you all know, it has been just me in the center. So hopefully soon I'll have 5 new staff members with whom this work can be shared. You know, that doesn't mean that I've had many people helping, not only here within, but also without. So all of you have been so helpful throughout the year. I know I've called upon many of you to ask questions. I thank you for your flexibility. So thank you all so much. It has been an amazing year. I can't believe it's another year that we've been together. And anything for good of the order before we go? And Leslie, if there's anything I forgot, please tell me. All right, anything for the good of the order?
Everything was discussed that was on the agenda.
All right, thank you so much. So we shall see you all virtually September 19th. Thank you so much for those who can work this summer on, oh, Stephanie, we can see you. So thank you all for those who are working this summer to present in the fall at our September meeting, a draft of the goals. All right, take care, enjoy your summers. I hope you get some time off. And thank you again for your service. It's much appreciated.